Okay, we will start, right? So first I'll share my screen. Okay, you just tell me, am I audible? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. See, our course title is Object Oriented Programming and Design. So this is the marking scheme that everyone knows. Uh, Programming task or quiz followed by the oral. For that, 40 marks are there, and for end semester, 60 marks are there. And myself, Harish Godade. I am from computer department. Okay, and you can refer this website also. Meanwhile, I'll just post some the material on that website. So, and last semester also few students are I think from electrical and electronics, so they know this. So some materials I just post on that website, right? So this is the programming course. I think you people are saying this is a minor course, as it is for the other branches students. But this is the most important subject because in the industry, most of the industries are working on this object-oriented programming. Right? Means most of the companies are using this concept. This either any language is a different thing, but that object-oriented concept every company is using. So this is most important subject. And see, oh, 1 minute. Okay, sorry. So you peoples might have the idea. In most of the company, that platform is Java platform, and this is the purely object-oriented programming, right? But the whatever the thing we are just taking here, that is the object-oriented programming, that is C++, right? So here, as we know, there are different programming paradigms are there. uh, when that programming is been started, so the paradigms have been considered. So we can see here. So these are the two types of the programming paradigms. One is imperative programming paradigms and declarative programming paradigms. So under this first one, there is a in first uh, part, that is a procedural programming paradigms. That is the one that is more popular. Second one is object oriented programming paradigm and parallel processing or concurrent programming approach. So these are coming under imperative programming paradigms, and under the declarative programming paradigms, logic programming paradigms, functional programming paradigms, and database programming approach. So actually these are the paradigms, because depends on that how that the programming language is. So depends on that these names have been given, because initially if you know, so that the very first popular language was C programming, right? And here that programming C programming is coming under the procedural programming paradigms. So we are focusing on this B1, that is object oriented programming paradigms. That is our main focus. I'll just simply tell you what the other paradigms are, right? Because this one and these two options are the important right now. Other programming paradigms are also there, but and the programming, if you see the parallel processing or concurrent programming approach, so these are used when you are using parallel programming. So and concurrent is again that the relative word to that. So we can say if a system is said to be parallel, when we can say that is parallel if it can support two or more actions executing simultaneously. So if it is supporting for the multi-processing kind of, but not multi, but this is a parallel processing, right? So normally if machine is having two processors and if your program is designed in such a way that so that program will execute on both processor, so that is nothing but the parallel processing, right? And concurrent processing is what? If it can support two or more actions in progress at the same time, then we can say that is concurrent programming. Same thing, if you go for the logic programming, this is normally used when we just design the logic gates, and that in that case we use this logic programming paradigm. And the functional programming is what? If that programming is using only functions. If you consider the C programming, so that C programming is, we can say, using only functions. So main program, that is main is again functions and others are function also. And database programming approach is what? So whatever is the language related to that database for backend, so that we can say that is a database programming approach. So which is the database programming here? So that SQL we can consider as a database programming. So these are the some the programming paradigms. So we'll just go in detail about this first two, procedural programming paradigms and object oriented paradigms. So these are the most important because in C programming or in the Pascal, COBOL, in that case that this concept is being used. And if you are using suppose high level the programming C++, Java and others, so in that case we can say that these programmings are using the object oriented approach, this one, right? So in short we will see the first one. One minute. So first approach, that is the important approach, because I don't know whether you have studied that C programming or not, but most of the people knows about the C programming, right? So in this approach, that problem is viewed as a sequence of things to be done, such as reading, calculation, and printing. If you see that the C programming structure, so what that structure is, first we take the input from the user. Like consider one example. Suppose you want to perform addition of two numbers, right? So what we do in that? So first we take the two number values from the user, that is reading. Consider this is a reading, and whatever is the addition of these two number, so that comes under this calculation, and whatever is the result you are printing, so that is a displaying of result. It means that is a printing. So in this, normally we use that sequential approach, right? And whatever the number of functions we are using into this, these functions will complete this task. So it means that main focus is on the function. In the, if you consider that example as a C programming, so we know that the main function is a main, right? So that is again function, and whatever are the functions we write inside of that main, again these will execute in that sequence, particular sequence, right? If suppose you are declaring the variable, if you are accepting the numbers, and if you are writing suppose any function to calculate something like addition of two numbers, so we can write that function there, you can call that function there, and after just executing that function, whatever the next line, that will be executed, right? So this approach is used in this procedural programming. It means main focus is on the function. And this you can see this diagram here. This main program is there. This is using suppose these three function, again under these two functions are there, again this one. It means we can use multiple functions in nested kind of, right? And this, but whatever is that approach, that is a sequential approach, because whenever you just call any function, so we can jump there from that calling statement to the definition, but again we need to come back to that the same control, right? So that means we are using the functions only here. So what is the problem in this? So the normally the code reusability feature is not present in this. So whatever, if you consider that other programming languages like the C++ or Java, so that code reusability feature is there, but in this is not. And we write that same code many times into this. Also, we can perform, we cannot perform actually whatever are the features in the object oriented programming, the main feature like inheritance is there, encapsulation is there. So these features are not present into this. And using the C++, we can uh, implement the real world problems. So it is very difficult to relate with the real world objects or problems. And here if you are using the function concept, and in concept normally we use some global variables, right? Suppose two functions are there, one is addition function and second one is the division function. So these functions are there and we are using suppose two variables, these are the global variable, then these global variables are very prone to attack. It means anyone can change the value of these two variable. It means we cannot trust on these two variables, whatever a and b global variable, these two global variables are very prone to attack. Anyone can change that value. So whatever is the expected result into this, that we cannot get, right? So that is the problem here. And this the procedural programming, you can see here these are the some drawbacks. So which one is first? So the code reusability feature is not present in this approach. Again, we have to write the same programming code many times. We cannot perform encapsulation, inheritance, abstraction, etc. And this the approach. And also it is very difficult to relate with real world objects. And whatever are the global data, that is more the prone to attack, we can say. So the because of this, we are going for the next approach, that is the object oriented approach. And whatever are these problem into this, so we can overcome these the problems into the object oriented programming paradigm, right? So we'll see in short what that object oriented programming paradigm is, right? So see here the one thing I just told you, that the data, that variable means what? That variable is nothing but the data, and the data is very prone to attack. It means that is not trusted. So, and this that is the problem. But when we just go for object oriented programming, that main focus is on the data. That object oriented programming, the treat that data is very critical, and we need to protect that data. So that main feature of the object oriented programming is that the considering that data is very critical, and we need to preserve that one, that security kind of, right? So we'll see this what it is. So, and this as I said, the object oriented programming treats data as a critical element in the program development. So here the data considered as a very critical element. When we just go with the examples, then you will understand the statement very well. Because how or why I am saying that in the ops that data is very critical. So and how we just maintain that the security into this, that we'll see when we just see the example, right? So object oriented programming treats data as a critical element in the program development and does not allow it to flow freely around the system. It means whatever is the external person, that person cannot access the data if it is the private data, and mainly focus is given on the data. And second thing in object oriented programming, as we said in the first approach, that is procedural programming approach. So in that everything is written in function, right? But here what we are doing here, so this object oriented programming ties data more closely to the function that operates on it. It means there is a close bonding between the data and the functions, right? And it protect it from accidental modification from the outside function. It means it ties the data more closely to the function that operates on it and protect it from accidental modification from outside world. So it means it is just protecting the data from the outside world. So here there is a clear bonding, we can say, with the data and the function. That is the thing. Now next one, what we can say, that object oriented programming allows us to decompose a problem into a number of entities. Now here that entity is nothing but the objects, and then build data and function around these entities. Now see, as we know that object oriented programming is having concept of class and object, right? So whatever is the problem divided into number of sections, so that is divided using that entity that is called as object, and all these function and data can be handled or accessed using that object only. That is the thing. See, right now I don't know whether you are understanding these points or not, but when I'll just take example, then in that case you will understand these points. So these 3 points I just told you. First is what it is, main focusing on the data, that is very critical element it is considering. Second one, the data and functions, these are tightly bound with each other. And last one is that the data and function can be accessed using object. These 3 points you just keep in your mind. When we just take example, you will understand these points, right? And here we can create the number of objects. So one example is given here. You can see here that object 1, object A, object B, and object C. These three are the objects. And for object A, some data is there and some functions are there. Now you can see here, this data is the critical. We are considering that is a critical. So this cannot be accessed by these entities directly. You can see only this function which is related to object A, that can only handle the data. Suppose this object B wants to access this data, so this will access through these functions. Directly that object B cannot access this data. So object A, and the same thing for the object B also. This is the critical data, private data we can say, and these are the, you can say, public function. If it is not public, then other function cannot access this also. And in all these objects what we are treating, this data is a private and the functions are public. Getting my point? The data is private, this is a critical, and the functions are public. That's why the object B and object C, suppose these can access only this function, these cannot access directly this data, right? So this thing is there for object B also and object C also. Here also this function is accessed by this object A and this object C, but the data cannot be accessed because this is a private data. But this function can access this data because both are the member of this object, right? So that's why here the data we are treating as a critical. Getting? And all these the objects can communicate with each other using message passing system. This object A and object B can communicate using message passing, and also same thing, the object C with these two can communicate using message passing. So this is the object oriented programming concept. So here that main thing is object, and that object, we can say this data and functions are tied together, and these will access using this object only, right? So this is the thing. You can see here, these are the features of object oriented programming. If you see, so already I just told you the features. Again, I have just listed it. You will understand these same features. So it emphasizes on data rather than procedure, because in the procedural programming approach, there that focus was on the procedure rather than data. As I said, if that global variable is there, then that is very prone to attack, that anyone can change. It means there is no focus on the data, but there is a focus on the procedure. How we write the function, what would be the sequence of this function, that is important in that procedural programming approach. But here that main focus is on the data rather than procedure. So this is the first one. Second one is what? Programs are divided into what are known as object. Already I just told you in this the programming approach. So that problem is divided into what? In object. Now here functions that operates on the data of an object are tied. It means function and data, these two are tied in this. So functions that operate on the data of an object are tied. So these two are binded together into this. Then data is hidden. Yeah, because if you consider this figure, so that data is hidden for the rest of world. These are the outside parties we can consider B and C. But for B and C, the data is hidden, right? So data is hidden and cannot be accessed by external functions. Like these two, the functions or entities cannot access this data part here. Only as the function is public, so these two entities can access this function. Now objects may communicate with each other through the function. So suppose this object and this object wants to communicate, so how they communicate? So using these two functions they can communicate, because only this function and this function, these two are public. So these can be accessed using this function, and this function part is called as member function in the object oriented programming. Now that new data and functions can be easily added whenever necessary. This is the thing here. This is again important. So whenever that necessity is there, so new data and also new function can be easily added whenever it is required. And last one is it follows bottom up approach, right? So these are the features in the object oriented programming. So that's why this programming is very popular, and the most of the industries are using this object oriented approach only, right? Now we will see some basics of this uh, programming approach. So these are the some features we can say. Now the basic concepts of object oriented programming. So these are the basic concepts that I'll just tell you in short. And whatever is this data encapsulation is one different concept, inheritance is different concept, polymorphism is again different concept. So for that we will just go in detail about all. So in short I'll just explain you what these things are, right? But in detail we are just we are taking in the separate the unit, because one separate unit is there on inheritance, data encapsulation, polymorphism, binding, and message passing, right? So here in short I'll just tell you this concept, because without knowing this concept we cannot go ahead. So first main part in this object oriented programming is object. As I said, using this object only, we can access the data and member functions, right? And class is what? So here, if you understand, if you know that concept of structure in C programming, then that same is here. Only this is we can say collection of what we say same kind of objects. So here, whatever are objects we are creating for, suppose one class, like consider this. So all these are of same type. So that is a thing. And This includes, that class includes the data and member functions. Sometimes it has the definitions of these member functions also, and sometimes the only the member functions are also, right? So when we consider this objects, so this is what, this is a runtime entity. Object is nothing but the runtime entity, and that object may represent any person, any place or bank or data, whatever, or any atom you can consider as an object. As I said, in this, that main focus is on the data, right? So consider that entity means that object is a person, right? So when we say that object is a person, then what is the related data to that person? That person name, that person address, that person salary, right? So these are the some the data, and these data are most important for that person. Right now we know how much is important our own information is there. So that information must be secure. So when we consider that person is an object, so data related to that object is that name, address, mobile number, right? So the many features are there, many things you can consider under that. Or suppose you are considering that the object is the bank account. So again, that bank account is an object, but the many things are related to that bank account, like account type, balance, whether it is saving or it is current, right? Branch code, IFC code. So multiple things are there related to that bank account, right? But that object is that bank account. So similar to that, we can consider the place or something. So related to that, you can consider the data. But in all, our main focus is on the data. We treat we are treating the data as a critical part, and that is more secure. That must be more secure, right? And when suppose I have created the two three objects, right? So how these two three objects have been interacted with each other? So when these objects executed, then and then these will be interacted with each other, and these will be interacted by using messages. Consider that customer is one account, sorry, customer is one object, and second one is the account, right? So how that customer object and account object will be interacted? So customer can send requests to that account about the balance. Getting my point? So using that, these two will be interacted with each other, right? And whatever is the action performed by that account, like that returning of that balance, so that is a reply from that object, we can say. Getting this? And what about the class? Now second one, this is a class. So class is what? This is a collection of objects of similar type, we can say, right? So collection of objects of similar types is nothing but the classes. So here we can create our own data type into this. Like see, the basic data types, these we know: integer, character, float. These are the basic data types, and the size of every data type that we know. So like for integer 2 bytes, for the string 1 bytes and something, right? Float 4 bytes. So everyone is having fixed size. But suppose I just want to create my own database, sorry, data type, then what I can do in C programming, there is another way to create that data type. But one simple way is using structure. I can create variable size data type, right? One example I'll just tell you. Oh, 1 minute. I'll just take my pen so that you will understand very well. Okay. Okay. Now see, uh, when we say these data types like integer, character, and float, right? Suppose its size is 2 byte, it's 1 byte, and it's 4 byte, right? This one. But this size is fixed. Now, suppose I just want to create my own data type. So that simple way in C programming is what we can use the structure. So like struct this one, and suppose I am using that structure name person, and here I can say name, then in suppose of any pin code, and float suppose salary, right? This one. Now see that same concept we are using C++ programming. You can see here. So here this integer size is fixed 2 bytes. It's 1 byte and it's 4 byte. But when we consider this struct person, and here suppose p1, right? Now see, this is the data type. Whatever is this part, this portion is nothing but data type, right? And this is a variable. Now see, the size of this variable is how much. If I am saying suppose here int a, then float suppose b, right? So here a size is 2 bytes and b size would be 4 byte, right? So this size is fixed when I declare like this. But here, and see, in this case again, this is a data type, right? And this is a variable. This is a variable. Now here, this is fixed size data type, this is inbuilt data type, and this is what the user created data type, we can say. And this is a variable, this p1, and p1 size is how much? This is 20 plus this 4, and sorry, consider this is 2 and this is 4. So total is 26 bytes, right? Now suppose here again I am just adding one more, uh, here suppose salary, comma, anything you can consider, or suppose here one more I'll do address 20. See, so before just adding this variable here, that size was 26 for this variable. It means this size of this data type is 26 before adding this one. But now suppose I have added this one. So how many bytes I am adding? 20 bytes. So 46 it would be. Then the next would be 46 bytes, right? So it means this is a variable sized data type. This thing is there in C programming. Suppose you want to create your own the data type. Now that same thing we are using here in the C++, whatever is this class. So using this class, we can create our own data type. Like here, suppose I'm saying class person, and here suppose int, what we consider, that is a pin code, okay? Pin code, character name, This is 20, and here float salary, and here this one, right? So only I am taking data, that's why this is looking similar. But here, if you consider the structure, so we cannot write inside this any function, but here we can write the function. But see, this data is protected, or we can say private. Any other, the outside object or something cannot access this directly. If suppose I am just putting here like public, suppose get data, right? So see, this is default private data, and this I am saying this is a public, so this is a public data. But see, as these two, both this the data and this member function, member functions, both are the part of this class person. So that's why this function can access this variables, or these this data. This function can access this data. This function is public function, and this is a private one, right? This function can access directly the data, right? But suppose any other function which is not part of this class, like this class person, so that cannot access this data directly, this data. If suppose that other the class object wants to access this one, then that object can access only this function, because this is a public function. And once you are coming over here, then we can access this data, this one. Getting this? But now, whatever the size of this one, roughly we can say this is 20 plus 4 plus this 1. So this is 20 plus 2 plus 1, 26. So that 26 size would be there. If I am suppose creating that object like P1, right? So roughly we can say that size is 26 bytes. Yeah. Have you understood this? So what that class is? Yes. So this is in short about the class. I'll just tell you in detail about this also. Now next we'll see that data abstraction and the data encapsulation is what. That is the next feature. 1 minute. Right. So what is mean by data encapsulation? This is what, this is wrapping of the data and function into a single unit, that is called as class, right? That whatever the single unit, I just told you that data and function, that get data is the function, and whatever are the variables with data type, these are the data. So data encapsulation what? So this is a wrapping of the data and functions into one entity. That entity name is class, and this wrapping is nothing but the encapsulation. I think you might understood this one. So wrapping of the data and functions into one entity or one single unit is nothing but the data encapsulation, right? So this is a data encapsulation. And here that the next feature, that is most important feature here, for the data encapsulation, same thing whatever I just explained right now, that same thing is there, how this has been encapsulated, and how that the private data will be accessed by the other, the third party. So how it would be accessed? So through that member function, right? Now, next is what? That inheritance. So inheritance is what? It is a process by which objects of one class can acquire the property of the another class. So like suppose one example I'll just tell you of that robin bird. Robin is a bird, right? And that bird can comes under the category of flying bird, right? This is a one class. Flying bird is what? That is a one class. So under that, that robin bird is coming. But again, one more class is there. So that is a bird, right? So it means that robin is coming under the class flying bird and bird. So this is kind of inheritance, right? So process by which object of one class can acquire the properties of another class. That is nothing but the inheritance. And this inheritance provide that reusability feature here. It means we can add the new features into the derived one. Whatever is the base class is having some features, and whatever the derived class, the derived class is having the extension of that base class, right? And that object can have the features of both. That is the thing, right? So this is nothing but inheritance. We have the complete unit on this inheritance. There are multiple the types of the inheritance also. These we will see, right? Now, what is mean by polymorphism? So polymorphism means what? The ability to take more than one form. Polymorphism means what? The ability to take more than one form. One simple example I'll just tell you. If suppose you are writing one function that is add, okay, addition of suppose two number, you are saying that function name is add. That function name we are using for addition of two number, and in C programming we cannot create one more function with the same name in C programming. Like add is a function that we're using for addition of two numbers. So once we create it, then another function, that name of add, we cannot create in C programming. But in C++ or in object oriented programming, we can have the functions with same name. Only whatever are the parameters, that parameter type would be different, or number of parameters would be different. Like first function is add, that is for the addition of two numbers, and second function is again add, that is concatenating the two string, we can say that is add, right? So but the name of the function is same. So that is nothing but polymorphism. So ability to take more than one form. That add is same function, but its forms are different. That the functioning of these two functions is different. So that is mean by the polymorphism, right? And that dynamic binding is what? So actually this is linking of procedure call and whatever is the data. So that as I said, uh, that data and the functions are bind together into this. So the linking of a procedure call to the code to be executed, so that is nothing but the dynamic, sorry, not the dynamic, it is a binding. And dynamic binding means what? That code associated with the given procedure call, right? So whatever is the code associated with the given procedure call. So see, once we have the function, so this function definition so this function definition either we can write inside of the class or outside of this class. So how that I'll just tell you, right? And when we consider that message passing, so there are some steps are there in message passing, how we can pass the messages or the objects of the different class or same class, how they pass the messages. So here first we need to create the object, right? Then we need to write the class definition, and lastly we whatever are these objects we created, these needs to be communicated with each other. So how they will communicate? So using the objects, these will communicate, like the functions of one class and functions of another class, how these will be interacted. So if you are creating the objects and when that program will be executed, so these two objects will be communicated with each other. So that is the thing here, right? So these are the some of the features of object oriented programming. We'll just take these details in these features in detail in tomorrow's lecture. Okay, so today uh, we have just I just told you only in short about these features and the two concepts, paradigms, like object oriented paradigms and procedural paradigms. So these two plus some features I just told you today. So tomorrow I'll just go in detail about these features, and then after that we'll start with the actual C programming. Okay, whatever the part I'm just taking today, this is theoretical part. I don't know how much you are understanding this theoretical part, but when we just go with the programming example, so then you can understand this one, right? So main thing here at this moment, you need to understand what is the object and what is the classes, right? So these two things are interlinked, object and class, because class, using class we can create one the you can say user defined data type kind of, and the data we can access through the object using object. So these two things you just understand here. And when we just take the actual programming examples, then you can understand this, and ultimately this is there in each and every program, data encapsulation, right? Because every time we are considering the data and the member functions in a class, right? So we are wrapping these two in every example. Okay, and these are the different the concepts, these we'll see in the separate unit. Okay, so I think we will stop here. Tomorrow we'll start with this feature, I'll tell you, and I'll just start with the actual programming. Okay, in tomorrow's lecture. So we'll stop here right now. If you are having any doubt, you can ask me. Okay, so I think 40 students have joined. 1 minute, I'll just stop this.